glad you can make it out here on what is apparently going to be quite a cold Monday night. Has anyone got little kids? Yeah. And you have to dress them how warm based on the temperature, so it's going to be 11 odd degrees tonight. So can everyone hear me, by the way? Is that all good? Okay, sorted. So yeah, I was just before this running around, putting kids bath and bed before coming here. It's a lot of fun. So we're here tonight to chat about hopefully something that can add some value to you guys, and something you can take away. So if you've got a phone you're going to put notes in, or use that old funny thing, a pen and a pad, you can do that. In fact, I would encourage a pen and a pad in terms of remembering things. It tends to be better. A little bit about myself. They're my two kids, and my wife and myself were just in Colorado in February, which is a lot of fun. Who likes to snowboard? Yeah. Who likes tree skiing, snowboarding? Who likes tree skiing / snowboarding? Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Really lots of fun. Anyway. So that was just we just came back from that, and one of my passions is my family, and we actually were over there with most of my immediate family, so about 14 people on the trip, so it was good fun. My background, as Pat alluded to, is I did double chemistry at uni, started in defence, switched across to basically finance in my own business for a while in distribution. And then back into the corporate finance world, now working for basically an annuity provider in the city. So a bit of fun, that's my background. Just two sort of, I guess, reasons that Rachel, who's my wife, and myself, I guess, tapped into this environment. And it was really around, we had two main goals. One was to own a place in Sydney, which is a pretty big goal. Who's the aspiration for that one? Yeah. Okay, still, yeah. And which we've just literally kicked off. We're in the settlement phase of that at the moment. And the second was to actually have Rach be a full-time mum, which she's done now for the past 3 odd years, looking after our kids. Maybe a day or two of work here and there to get her out of the house, because she goes. Who's worked from home before? I know, James, I know you do, right? Don't you just, I did it for 2 years. You climb the walls to get out if you don't get out and go and see people. So, but she's having a lot of fun doing that, and that's something we definitely wanted for our kids. And we knew that following the traditional corporate path necessarily is not going to get us that flexibility that we need. So tonight I'm talking about secrets of getting things done, strategies to take your productivity to the next level. So this is a book by Vincent Harris, which I read a couple of years ago. And for those guys who have been as a repeat offender, like Pat mentioned, who were here 2 years ago, almost to the month actually, you would have seen an earlier version of this talk. And it's actually interesting. I'm now looking back on it with different eyes, 2 years on, what I've applied from it, and I guess what I found useful, and we'll go through that. So hopefully, if you've got your pens and pads, there are some pretty practical things to write down, or phones, or whatever you're going to type in. Go for that. So I'm going to talk around effective prioritisation. And my first question starts with, can you make $600,000 in a few hours?
If you're Warren Buffett,
I missed that one.
If you're Warren Buffett, you can.
If you're Warren Buffett, okay, Al, that is a probably fairly reasonable answer. Well, back in the 1920s, this is one of the this is in the 1920s. This gentleman did it. So $600,000 then is worth a lot right now. So some of you might have heard of a steel industry magnate, Charles Schwab. Back in the 20s, Ivy Lee, who was basically walked into his business, had a chat with him, said to him that, listen, if you give me 15 minutes with each of your managers, basically we'll change everything in here. We'll turn the place around. And he's a magnate. He's at the top of the game. So he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. 15 minutes, go for it. So he actually only took 10 minutes with each manager within this particular business. And he said, listen, in 90 days, just pay me what it's been worth to you. So no charge, no fee, just pay me what it's been worth for you. And so in 90 days' time, he got written a cheque for $600,000 in the 1920s. So what did he do? Does anyone actually want to know what he told the managers? Yeah? And it took him 10 minutes. It's incredibly simple. And you might do parts of it already. So who writes a to-do list? Yep. Who writes it the day before? What are you giggling? Mike's got his hand up, pretty solid, yeah, okay. He basically said to those managers, just write down, you know, what your goals are for the week. Write down the 6 most important things you need to do tomorrow and write it down the day before. And for those who've been here for the neuroplasticity talk in the past, you'll know why that is in terms of subconscious and conscious brains. I'll touch on it very lightly, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about it tonight. That's a different talk. But he knew about, Ivy Lee knew about this at this stage. He may not have known why and the neuroscience behind it per se, but there was a study done by George Miller in the 60s, so 40 years later. He wrote a paper called... it was a paper on human consciousness. It was called plus or minus 7. 7 plus or minus 2. Sorry, tell you other 5 all the way through to 9. And the idea was you can hold 5 to 9 chunks of information in your consciousness or in your awareness at any one time. So that's why 6 fell within that range and just happened to work. So half a dozen. The other good thing about, I guess, which he talks about in this is that when you're writing your list, so this is the first practical thing you can write down, write it the day before. I've got actually in my calendar at 4:45 every day, a 15-minute slot. I don't let anyone book anything over it, of which I write down what I've got to do the following day. I'll just put it in my work calendar. It's very easy to do. The good thing about crossing stuff out as you go is you actually get like a sense of, it's like a quick win or a small satisfaction, like yes, tick, done, and it's that psychological thing and that positive reinforcement of actually ticking your goals off as you go throughout the day. And anything you don't get done on that 6 for whatever reason, you just transfer to the next day and off you go. So very simple. I've covered that and that. Everyone heard of the Pareto principle? Well, people know it primarily as the what rule? 80-20. 80-20 rule. Very good. Examples of the 80-20 rule. You see it all over the place within work. Who's seen this sort of applied within your job and business? Like, if anyone in business development per se, what's the 20? The bit that we all love doing.
The bit that makes us money.
The bit that makes us money, correct? But it's usually prospecting or whatever. Those making those. Those fun connections. So really what you've got to figure out is what in your role truly makes a difference. What is that 20%? Because ultimately if you can write down those, if there's 100 components to a different project, or a particular project, write them all down, like every single one, and then just figure out, okay, well out of this, what's the top 20? What's going to give the biggest impact? And do those first if you can. And you do those components first is the idea, because you'll get 80% of the way towards the goal that you need to get to and have the most impact. And this leads on to what he calls the law of forced efficiency, because ultimately there's never going to be enough time to do everything. There's never going to be enough time to do those 100 things. So if you start with if you can only get 50 things done, and you start with the 50 that don't actually do anything, the project's not going to succeed or do very little. There's never enough time to do everything, but there's always enough time to do the most important thing. So that's why prioritization becomes really critical. In terms of, we talk about this a lot. For those who've been hanging around a while, you've heard about a 5-year plan. You can go and Pat will show you where you can get that at the end on the website. But it's literally do you actually have a goal? Do you know what your goals are? What are the steps to get to those? What are the 20%ers that are going to get you towards those goals? And just remember, when you die, your inbox won't be empty. Okay, so don't try. Is the idea. Just focus on the most important things. Okay, because ultimately you're never going to finish it anyway. When you are focusing on these tasks, see the task is already being done. Who likes to exercise? Yeah, I use this example because this resonates with me amazingly in the morning when it's really cold. But you've got to think about, what is it that you don't think about the process of going through it, but think about the end result. And for me, there's 2 examples. One thing I procrastinate on amazingly is doing my tax, because I know it takes like 2 days or like an entire weekend to do my tax. And who's got kids? Yeah, who has 2 whole days uninterrupted? Yeah, right. And the second thing is exercising in the morning. Like, but who loves getting up at 5:30 when, especially now when it's dark and cold. Yeah, and I can sit there, lie in there in bed with all of the reasons going through my head. There's mosquitoes outside right now. They're pretty vicious, especially this time of morning. There's the grass is still wet. I exercise outside. Like all the different reasons I can come up with as to why I should just, I could just do it tomorrow. It'd be easier. But the problem with that is if you procrastinate, you get momentary relief. You get to lie down, go back under the doona, and stay there. And you can see I've got a good experience with this. But that's momentary relief, but you have long-term I should have really got up and trained this morning. You know what I mean? Or I didn't achieve that result, and that creates like a negative feedback loop, around, and you have like a negative association with that task. Whereas if you focus on the positive side of things, you focus on the end result, you get out and you actually do it, and then you feel good. So you have a positive association with the exercise, you're more likely to go and do it again. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. So you just got to focus on the result that you're after, not on the process necessarily to get there. And that ultimately creates an internal system that makes you more action orientated, because if you take action you get the results, so you'll take more action, and it's a self-fulfilling thing. So is lying in bed, by the way. It just goes the other way. Expectation versus training. I did want to touch on this. We don't rise to the level of expectation, but we fall to our level of training. And Kieran Perkins is probably the best speaker I've heard on this. When he came and talked at a function I was at, and he said that I think it was in his 1500 metres event in the 2000 Olympics from memory, it's a while ago now, but he had effectively barely qualified for the final. He just had a horrible race, but he said even though everything went wrong in the race, goggles filled with water, all that sort of exciting stuff, he fell back to his worst practice habit, and his worst practice habit was he had trained for, and if swimmers, they're up every morning training every day for years, right, to get this right. And he'd and his best practice habit was, I know I can do, I think it was I'm not a swimmer, so it's at 100 metres in under a minute. Would that be a pretty good speed? Or is it 50 metres in under a minute? 100. There we go. From all the swimmers in the audience. Okay, so we've got 100 metres, right? And he managed to clock that in just under. He knew he could do that in just under a minute. So 1,500 metres was just doing that 15 times, right? And so he still got into the final and actually ended up coming back and doing very well. He basically fell back to his level of training. He expected to go well in the race, but it just didn't happen, right? So you've got to think about expectation versus training, and trust me, you need both. And I'm going to go back to an old example because it was actually very pertinent at the time that I originally gave this talk, and it's still pertinent today because I still walk past it. I work in Martin Place, and the Link Cafe in Martin Place. Everyone remember what happened there about 2 and a bit years ago with the siege of Martin Place? And this is obviously a fairly if you just got to think, okay, if I'm inside that room, I'm one of those people held captive. What the SWAT team or equivalent in Australia, who's going to come break down the door? Are you just wanting them to expect things are going to go well, or are you going to want them to have some serious training behind them? Some, like, not only physical training, but they've practiced taking down buildings constantly. They've done this many times, and it's a reaction now for them. You know what I mean? Who do you want coming in? The person who's just going to expect. They still need to expect it's going to go well, but they need the training to back it up as well. And another example I've got of this, which is fairly close to home, my dad's a surgeon, and he's now got close to 40 odd years experience in his field. So again, if you're the patient, you've got to ask yourself, who are you wanting? A doctor who's brand new out of uni, who's expecting everything to go well, but it's their first operation with no guidance? Or are you looking for someone with years and years of experience? They've done this hundreds of times, the same operation, different environments, different different internal, details, so they have to learn to deal with every situation, etc. You know what I mean? This is expectation versus training. You need both. You can't you can't expect, well, I don't know whether anyone wants to be that person. Now, obviously, every doctor has their first operation, but they're usually a very experienced person, like my dad, sitting there beside them, advising them what to do. And that's what we would call mentoring in this room. One other thing you can do with your action-oriented stuff is learn to play the how much can I do game, per se. Thank you, mate. And that would be, has anyone, we've established people who've got kids. Has anyone had troubles ever getting them to put stuff away? Like, toys, at the end of the... Does it stop at 3 or does it keep going? No, it keeps going? Okay, right. I was hoping it might stop at 3. So one of the fun things that we do is that we make it a game. Because ultimately, instead of breaking down a task into particular pieces and saying, okay, well, I can get I'm going to allocate 15 minutes for this task, switch it on its head. Say, how much can I get done in 15 minutes? It's a simple thing, but it's hilarious. If we were relying on Cooper packing up his things, I'd still not be here, right? I'd still be coming. But if you make it fun, you count from 10. 10. Okay, go pick up your truck and put it in the thing. Okay, ready? 10, 9, 8, and he sprints around the house doing this stuff at lightning speed because it's fun. Right, so I don't know, make a game out of whatever the tasks are you need to do. I see this at work all the time with my guys in my team because I'm in a distribution role, and they're constantly saying, okay, we know I got 6 referrals last week. I really want to crack the, 6 referrals in the day last week. I really want to I want to get 7. I saw today at 2 p.m. this afternoon, one of the guys in my team was sitting there going, all right, I've already hit 7. Now I've just got to get that extra one, get that 8. You know what I mean? They're always, tapping into that innate human desire to do better every time. So if you switch it on its head and just say, how much can I actually get done? As opposed to allocating a certain amount of time for every task. And all these actions create habits at the end of the day. So your success in life, effectively, will be some result of your habits, good and bad. One of the primary reasons that he goes through in the book that people fail to, at least in the long term, increase their productivity is that they just don't do it for long enough. They don't create a habit out of it. So I know in previous talks we've heard 21 days to create a habit. Most people sort of have heard that somewhere. It takes 21 days to create a habit. But when you actually look at breaking down the old neural pathway, the old habit per se, it can take longer. So usually 2 or 3 times 21 days per se. So in the book he says 90 days just to be safe, right? So if you just made it simple, if you just change one habit over 90 days, you think you have it fairly well cemented? If you're going to the gym, let's say, and you're starting off in January like most people do, you notice it's sufficiently thinned out by February, and by the end of March you've probably got people who are going to be there for the rest of the year. But they make something like 70% of their money in January. It's hilarious. The idea is create a habit out of things that obviously you want to change in life. Why do people so many fall off the bandwagon? Well, we've just discussed that. One of the major reasons they fall off the bandwagon with this is they try to do too many things. They get excited and they try to do too many things at once. They try and go and train at the gym and be like Arnold Schwarzenegger and go do property developments and go and trade and hold a full-time job and have kids, and guess what? You're going to fail at all. Well, not fail at all, but your results will be very limited in all of those fields. But just cement one thing at a time. Get a habit, because when you make a habit of things, it takes less time to do that thing because it's a repeat reaction sort of thing. And then once you've got that squared away, start into something else. There's a really good book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. I've read that. I was asked by James how many times I've read the book here before I got up there. It's about 3 times, but this one I've read more than that. And there's an audio on it you can get as well. It is amazing to have a listen to and just re-cement in your head what just the effect of your habits are over the long term. And one thing I learned from someone in this room, actually, who's sitting in the front row, who introduced me, is be a note sender and a gift giver. And that actually, so what does this have to do with productivity? Very good question. Winston Churchill writes, we make a living by what we get, we make a life by what we give. And he goes through some really funny examples in the book, actually, like an elderly couple comes into McDonald's, comes to go and buy a meal, it's $6, right? And then they realise they left their wallet at home. Elderly couple, give difficult for them to get back home. Manager's like, you know what? Just have it. You know what I mean? That's okay. And small little act, right? Small little act of kindness. It's not really going to cost his business much, right? And you notice that if you give a big gift, you almost sort of expect. If you were to give someone a car or something like that, you'd almost expect them to say at least thank you. You know what I mean? Or you might receive something in return. Whatever, but you almost expect something in return if you do something big for someone. But if you do something small for someone, like a $6 McDonald's meal, the reaction they got, they received a couple of weeks later a two-page letter written by this couple just thanking them for their kindness, etc. You know what I mean? And they didn't have to do it. You know what I mean? But it's just a little thing. And I know that you just got to look in your life. Where can you add value? Where can you just give a little? What we refer to in this room is be a bucket filler, not a bucket dipper, if you like, or be a go-giver, right? So, there's a story about, well, not a story, but I heard from stage again someone talk about, those people in your life who, you'll know the bucket fillers, because they're always great to be hanging around, and you'll identify pretty quickly the bucket dippers, right? The people who just take a little bit out of your bucket every time they go past, right? There's multiple examples of that. I'm not going to go into that one too quickly, but I mean, one of the practical things that Rachel and I now do, which I learned from Pat, was just we just got to go to the $2 shop, funnily enough, and the $1 card racks, just grab 20 of them, whatever, and just write people a note like, hey, appreciate your time the other day or whatever it was, thank you. And that, what does this have to do with productivity? At the end of the day, if you're going to do anything substantial, you need a team of people around you. And you need people to cooperate with you. And so if you've done little gestures for people like that around, it actually builds that rapport, that team around you, so that when the time comes and you need some expertise or you need something else, it's reciprocal and people will come back to you, and you build that team around you. So that will enable you to leverage your results a lot faster by having a whole team of people working with you than you just battling it out on your own. All of this doesn't come without getting out of your comfort zone. So apologies to say that, but all real learning is preceded by confusion and discomfort. And I see, actually it's quite funny in my team at work, I do see there's some people are open and open to change, and some are less open to change per se. They eventually come around, but you've just got to approach them in different ways. Because the whole process and constantly stretching yourself and getting out of your comfort zone, the whole idea is that eventually you become comfortable with the discomfort, and that being you're developing your what they call emotional intelligence, or you're developing your EQ. To start this process, you just do something small every day. It may be getting up and training at 5:30 in the morning. That may be a small thing you can do. I don't know what it is, right? It may be making a connection, in this room through the person who brought you here. That may not be very comfortable for you, but you know what? That's a small little step, whatever it is. For me, I've seen a lot of benefit from people in the room who have helped mentor me through different processes. And Dan's not here tonight, but he was saying that he's helped me along the path to find basically our first property with nothing expected in return, if that makes sense. So he's given his time, his expertise to help effectively Rachel and myself out, and that's out of my comfort zone. But often a mentor can see the woods from the trees because they've got a different perspective. They're not emotionally tied to the outcome of your result, so they can give you unbiased, effectively arm's length advice, if you like, based on their experience. So if you do get the opportunity to chat to anyone in the room who's got experience in the area that you're trying to develop within yourself, absolutely maybe send them a card. One of the things I learnt along the way as well is if you're on time, you're late. Who has those people in their life who always turn up late? Yeah? Is it annoying? Does it get you? It does me. I had a great example of this So for me, it's actually my parents that are always late. I know they're doctors, and yes, sometimes they're legitimately running late. If you're pulling something out of someone's throat because they're choking, that's okay. You can be late to the barbecue, but if you just going around the corner, you're leaving half an hour after you're due there, and it's 2 minutes around the corner. It's like you're planning on being late, right? Anyway, if you plan to be early, you'll be on time for everything. And reputation. This builds your reputation, because basically every time you turn up on time, it builds a bit of trust with the person you're meeting with, because you said you'd do something and then you've done it. But every time you turn up late, it erodes that trust. You said you'll be there at 9:30, you're at late, quarter to 10 or something, right? And that's okay, but I mean, how frustrating does it get when someone is consistently late? Does that erode your trust in the fact that they're going to be there on time? I've got a great example of this the other day. I was Tuesday last week. I was travelling to the city to meet someone for a coffee before work. One of my work colleagues who works in the property side of things, wanted to pick his brain on a couple of things. And I said, yeah, cool, I'll meet you before work at 8:30, start at 9. So I'm getting into an earlier bus than usual. And has anyone seen those buses? And they're sort of eerie. You're sitting there looking at your phone, and you're okay, 2 minutes, the bus is going to be here. 1 minute, okay, it's arriving shortly. It's gone a minute ago, gone 2 minutes ago. I call it a ghost bus.
Oh, I just got it.
I got that. It's this bus that just never shows, right? And I'm sitting there going, great, that was the express bus I was going to catch to get done to my appointment 15 minutes early. So now I'm stuck on a all stops bus. And here I am, running down Martin Place, I got there 3 minutes late, okay? But for me, I don't like getting to places late because it erodes trust, in my opinion. So, if you plan to leave, I should have planned to leave maybe earlier than I did. But that's a great example of, and you know what? When you arrive and you're like, you're still like heavy breathing, trying to get in the lift and whatever. It just creates stress in your life that maybe if I'd left 5 minutes earlier, then maybe I'd got another bus. Who knows? Box yourself in for excess. Be accountable on paper. Make it visual is a really good thing if you can do it. And this is an example. If you draw up 10 boxes by 3, so if you add an extra box for a month, right, for 31 days, and just whatever your habit is you're trying to improve, it may be exercising, it may be whatever it is, practicing something. And every day you do something, you just fill in the box. And then next day you do it, fill in the box. Next day you do it, fill in the box. Fourth day, I forgot to do it. And that gap, and yes, we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they were all good. But that gap will frustrate the hell out of you. And you won't, and you do this over 30 days, there might be a few gaps and you'll be like, oh man, this is killing me. So, if you make it really visual, it just keeps you accountable to yourself. The other thing you can do is not necessarily be accountable to yourself, which is always a good thing on paper, write it down, because if it's in your head, it can change. Right? But be accountable to someone else. And I've got here a mentor, but it could be a really good example is a gym partner. I used to have a gym partner get up and travel to the city and meet him and would train at 7 o'clock in the morning. But I had to leave at, 5:45 to get there. And it was like, some mornings, you just don't want to go. You're sore, you're tired, right now it'd be kids keeping you up at night as well. Like, you got all these excuses under the sun as why you don't want to go, right? But guess what? I've got to meet Mark, my gym partner. He's going to be there. And he's probably thinking exactly the same thing. Oh crap, I don't really want to get up, but Adrian's going to be there, so I've got to go. And you know what I mean? It's actually being accountable to someone else that actually often keeps you in the right environment. And this is a really good environment, by the way, to have a mentor or just be surrounded by people who are all heading largely in the same direction, that is, towards their goals. To be able to, have that gym partner, for example, just because if you get to the end of the weekend, your mentor is going, okay, so how'd you go with that thing you said you were going to do? Did you do it? And that's often a moment of truth if you haven't done it. Your mind will process things faster than you think. Have you ever been stuck assessing a problem at all? I spend a lot of time in Excel. Don't ask me why. I'm in business development, but I'm in Excel. So, and often you're sitting there trying to figure something out, how to extract some data so we can make some calls on this, just give to the team, whatever it is. And you just get a mental block. Anyone been sitting at the computer for too long and get that? Yeah? And then you walk away for half an hour, go do something else, just don't think about it. You come back and it just pops into your head like, duh, a really simple answer, right? And thinking your way through a problem is actually the slowest way to work, because it uses the prefrontal cortex in your brain. Your unconscious brain is far faster. So effectively, if you have a fairly, big question that you're asking yourself, first of all, a big thing you're trying to achieve, write it down what it is, but don't ask it as a statement. Actually, ask it as a question, because you're asking your unconscious a question, effectively at the end of the day. And then, basically, instead of as an example there, how can I make $1,000 in the next 6 days? Not I can't make $1,000 in the next 6 days. And I'm trying to teach this to Cooper, my 3-year-old, you know what I mean? I can't do it. I can't put this together. I can't. I'm like, no. Ask yourself, how can you? How can you put the puzzle together? How can you, make the man fit in the truck, or whatever it is he's trying to do, right? Because I don't know where you heard I can't, but I'm pretty sure it's at daycare. I'll blame them anyway. But because we're trying to teach him that, how can I achieve something, not, I can't do it. And basically, you can use the idea, if you write something down, come back to it 24 hours later, and then write out, the first 50 answers that pop into your head, because you'll come out with some good, some will be completely hideous and some will be really good. But the idea is let your walk away and let your subconscious work on it for 24 hours and then come back. Ever heard the expression, walk away, sleep on it? Yeah, it's sort of one of those things coming around. They didn't know why it was back then. And just as a side note to all of this is why, if you're surrounded in an environment by people who are also moving down this path, where, it's very important to get consistent with exposure to this, because your environment really affects your outcomes. Supportive environment versus not. So stick around. There's whole lots of different things you can tap into to get that. Learning to say no is really critical. Who loves saying no? Yeah. People hate telling you no. They really do. They just avoid your calls. They and then you eventually catch them on the phone, because I work in a phone-based role, and they're like, oh yes, I was going to do this, but then and I didn't. And he's like, okay, yeah, cool. You just yes or no. I'm happy with either answer. Okay, well I can't really do it now. Okay, well, and you just pin them down on it, like in terms of, okay, well, is it you just don't want to go ahead, or you just don't have the time right now, and then if they have, no, I really do want to do it. Okay, great, let's book another time. Anyway, so say no, but with people skills is the idea. Okay, so this is really, really important, and because it's going to increase your productivity big time. If you by saying yes to some things, you're also saying at the same time no to an unlimited number of things you could be doing with that time. So I guess the thing you're saying yes to, it goes back to your 5-year plan. You've got to be sure it's in line with what you're actually trying to achieve. Because if not, you're taking away from something you could be doing. Every time that, and this is I'm not by any means saying go jump up and leave your job. That's not what I'm saying. But every time I go to work, I'm being paid to do something other than, I'm being paid not to spend time with my kids. I'm being paid not to pursue property development. I'm being paid not to spend time with my wife. This is when you think about it in reverse, what you're being paid to do versus what you're not being paid to do. And as I say, everyone's got responsibilities. You can't just jump up and run out of work. That's not the point. And you might be passionate about what you do, and if you are, that's amazing, because you should be. Money comes, money goes, time just goes. Okay, so you really want to be passionate about what you're doing, because otherwise, at the end of the day, if you're not focusing on what you want to do, make changes to get towards where you want to go. You can't obviously just jump up and run, but often when you realise what you're being paid not to do, you'll find your passion at the end of the day. There are 3 answers to a question when someone asks you to do something. What are they? Yes, no, maybe. Yeah, it's not that hard. It's not a trick question. So one thing you can do, whether you do this weekly, quarterly, monthly, whatever, is write down all the yeses, write down all the nos, and then write down things that are sitting in the maybe column. Because maybes, you want to get them out of that column really quickly. Maybes occupy a huge amount of mental energy. and what I call mental bandwidth, because when you've got so much mental bandwidth, you can fit in your head at one time, and if you keep saying maybe and don't make a decision on something, but yes or no, it just clogs up your thinking. You can't think straight. So even if you make it visual, put it on a piece of paper. One thing about meetings, who has a lot of meetings with their work? I do. Yep. Sorry? It's all meetings. There you go. There you go. The question is, do you actually get anything done? No.
Made $1,000, thank you.
No, there you go. There you go. So maybe you can make 600,000 by the end of it. No? Okay. Anyway, let people know up front how much time you have in the meeting, because this is there's some really good things here, because the person you're talking to will then put a frame around the meeting and what they need to prioritise. Because if they've got something that would normally take 15 minutes to explain, and yet you say, listen, I've only got 5 minutes, they're going to do a pretty fast editing job on that and just tell you the main points, right? And what you need to know to make a decision. Conversely, if you say, I've only got 5 minutes, and you sit there for 20 minutes with them, what are you telling them?
I like it.
I like it, potentially. Potentially it's just a way of saying no with people skills. No, joking. No, the answer I'm looking for is, if you give someone 20 minutes when you said you've only got 5, again, you're saying one thing and doing another. And effectively, they're like, you're training that person that, hey, I can walk up to you at any time and just, grab 20 minutes even though you've only got 5 minutes. And if you keep doing that, they'll just expect it. Right? So if you can effectively just, and also if you say, listen, I've only got 5 minutes, when it comes around to the 5 minute mark and you truly only have 5 minutes, you've got permission to look at your watch. Start giving them cues that this is about to wrap up, right? So be it 15 minutes, hour, whatever it is, the time frame is, whatever you set, stick to it, and that will convey that you say what you do and you do what you say at the end of the day. Stick to your time frame. So there's a little bit of homework from tonight. I hope you guys have got something from it, but if you do really want to achieve some of your goals this year, then I suggest what you do is implement one of these principles. Just one at a time. Doesn't, if you want more after that, but actually implement one for 90 days. Obviously connect with the person who's invited you along, because if you can work out, maybe even say to them, listen, this is a couple of things I'm after, who do you think in the room would be a good person to speak to? And then, it may even be in Queensland, because this obviously runs up in Queensland as well. Do your homework. I've got there. Do your 5-year timeline. If you haven't done that, if you don't have any goals, it's difficult to find exactly what path you want to take. And ultimately, pay it forward. If you've learned something good tonight, pay it forward to someone else. If you develop a habit, and whatever it is, maybe putting something at 4:45 in your diary for 15 minutes to plan your day the following day, if that's all it is and it works for you, then tell someone else. Because ultimately, are you here to be a bucket dipper or a bucket filler? At the end of the day, if you're here to fill buckets, hopefully I'll pass on some info that's useful for you guys.